And then at the end, being when Antonio Banderas prays right before their last battle, where basically everybody thinks they're all going to die.
Yeah.
He just asks God to allow him to live his last moments well.
Yeah.
Merciful Father, I have squandered my days with plans of many things. This was not a man then.
Hello and welcome to the Brothers Random Show. My name is Travis.
And I'm Michael.
And we are two ordinary brothers discussing extraordinary ideas and some random shit. So the topics on the show range from theology, masculinity, stories, movies, philosophy, books, pop culture, and many other subjects. We often talk about the people we admire and the wisdom they share. People such as Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, who we believe is the sage of our time. Michael, why are we here?
Our family recently experienced a tragedy, and our nephew is no longer with us. He had a real affinity for Norse mythology and Viking culture. So with him in mind, we decided to revisit one of the better Viking movies, The 13th Warrior.
They are demons.
You must know that 13 men have been chosen to destroy this evil.
What the hell are you saying?
The 13th man is you.
Now, one man
Tell them I am no warrior.
who has never known courage
Of that they are aware.
will join 12 warriors
I cannot live this. Grow stronger.
who have never known fear.
Let's go, little brother. I do not enjoy heights.
And become something he never dreamed possible.
Prepare yourself.
One of them. From Michael Crichton, author of Jurassic Park, and John McTiernan, director of Die Hard.
A 90s film, which we will get into, but yeah.
Yeah, The 13th Warrior came out in 1999. It starred Antonio Banderas and was directed by John McTiernan, John McTiernan, if you don't know who he is, he directed Die Hard. He directed the Predator with Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, he was a basically 90s director, 80s, 90s director that had a lot of success in those years, in those decades. So this may have been the movie that destroyed his career, though. So,
because it didn't do super well. Let's save that for later. But
yeah, we'll
just
get
kinda
into spoilers at some point with this movie. For now, we're just going to talk overall thoughts on the film because it's about men on a mission. It's a men on a mission film. It was based on a novel by Michael Crichton, who is one of my favorite authors. And I did read the book back in high school. It's a tough read because what Michael Crichton tried doing is, if you all know the story of Beowulf, the ancient text that you usually learn about in high school, sometimes college English courses. So it's basically, at one point it was required reading for high school students.
Yeah, I read it in high school. Yeah.
Beowulf. And so what Michael Crichton did is he took, so there was the character that Antonio Banderas plays. I'm going to butcher his name, but his name is
Ahmad Ibn Fadad.
What the fuck? What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Yeah,
something like that.
It's a tough name to pronounce. Ahmad Ibn Fadal.
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Yeah,
Fadalen?
they refer to him throughout as the Arab.
As
Arab.
the Arab. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny because Antonio Banderas is Spanish and he's playing an Arab, but anyway, that was the 90s. So he was a real person. The person that Antonio Banderas is playing was a real person who did go to did like histories of the
Mhm.
Norsemen. He was basically an observer. He would watch them and he would record. And so what Michael Crichton decided to do is take that text and that character and put him into the Beowulf story.
Mm.
And it's a good idea. I don't think the book was called The Eaters of the Dead. I don't think it was a big success, but it is
Yeah,
interesting because
didn't he run into a bunch of publishing problems because they were trying to tell him don't call it Eaters of the Dead. That's just not
yeah,
a name you call a book or something like
yeah.
that. And so he was like, okay, well, the
Well,
13th Warrior.
they re-released it. So he
Oh, they did.
originally
Okay.
released it as The Eaters of the Dead, and then they re-released it, and it
Okay.
was the 13th War. 13th Warrior is a better name
Name.
anyway.
Yeah.
But this movie actually had a ton of production problems. I guess John McTiernan was getting into fights with, according to legend, John McTiernan was getting into fights with Michael Crichton, and Michael Crichton was a big deal at the time because ER was one of the biggest shows on television,
Well, I mean,
and
Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park had come out
Yeah.
in 2 years prior. So there was a lot of, and then there was a lot of studio meddling. I believe this is a Universal picture, and or no, Touchstone. It's a Touchstone movie. Anyway, they had all these problems on set, and the movie's cut weird. I would say the first half and the last half are cut really strangely. It's kind of getting you into the story as quickly as possible and not giving you any breathing room, because it's a very strange way to start a movie. It starts with him on the ocean. He's in a boat. It's old 90s CGI, so it doesn't hold
I
up very well.
honestly, I was just like, we still got movies that are worse
that are worse than this with their CGI. Yeah, you're right. It looked like we have had
99
movies this year that have looked worse
looked
in their
worse than
CGI.
that.
Yeah. That's sad. That's sad to say. Anyway,
Progress.
yeah, progress. So basically,
Yep.
and it starts with him going, my name is, and then he lists off his really long name, and then he goes, and things weren't always thus. And it's got Antonio Banderas' thick Spanish accent, and it's just a clunky starting to a movie. He gives a little bit of his own backstory, which I get them trying to do because that's the way the book is. He starts out, he kind of gets assigned to a ambassador post in the far north countries, and it's kind of like the asshole of the world kind of thing. Like the Sultan decided to send him away because he was causing problems in the Sultan's court.
Yeah.
And this is a fish out of water story, I would say. So he's traveling, and
did you notice at the beginning the name of the guy he's with?
Is
Melchizedek.
Melchizedek, yeah, which is one of the early. And he's played. So get this, he's played by Omar Sharif, and Omar Sharif is famous for playing a Arab in Lawrence of Arabia.
Interesting.
When he was a young man,
Yeah,
Omar Sharif
yeah.
was in tons of stuff. Do you remember Dr. Zhivago? And there's Dr. Zhivago. There was Funny Girl with Barbara Streisand. He was in that. So
Remember Funny Girl.
Omar Sharif was a famous in his youth, and he's an old man in this movie. I think about maybe 5 or 10 years after this movie was made, he passed. But it was good to see him in it, and he plays Melchizedek, or he plays a character named Melchizedek, which is an interesting addition to that.
Interesting, because this is the beginning of a hero's journey, which if you know your Bible, basically Abraham was Melchizedek was kind of his what
Mentor.
mentor. Yeah, mentor, you could say.
Yeah.
He basically Abraham paid tithes to Melchizedek, and and Melchizedek is actually the name of the very beginning of the book The Alchemist. Melchizedek calls the hero of that story to go and do something. Yeah. So I found it super interesting that this guy's name was Melchizedek. Not necessarily that he was calling him to go do something, but in a sense, because that was probably one of my favorite parts in the film, was them the 13 warriors being called. So they have this oracle come out. These men receive a messenger. I guess
Antonio Banderas' character meets the Northmen,
and he's curious about him. He wants to talk to him.
He wants to learn about them, which is what his character really did in real life. He wrote manuscripts about the Northmen. Some of the earliest observations of the Northmen is done in Arabic. And so anyway, there is trouble further north with another king, Hrothgar, and Beowulf, or the Beowulf character in this movie, he's called Bolvine.
Yeah,
Bolvine. Which is a translation, like a difference in translation, according to my understanding about this story. Anyway, so they're at his camp, they're his guests, and this oracle shows up and starts saying 13 warriors should go further north to Hrothgar's kingdom and help him battle an unknown evil.
Or unnamed. They won't name it.
They know,
like
they
that shall not be named, or the name should not be uttered.
And Iban, or is it Antonio Banderas' character, is just kind of observing this, and then the oracle says the 13th warrior can be no Northman. And they all, everybody in the camp,
looks at him. It's like,
and he's like,
but that scene I thought was pretty cool, because
it was.
She says there must be 13 that go, and then I will go, and they all kind of stand up, and it's this rah. And then all of a sudden it's like, can't be a Northman, it has to be a foreigner, and everybody looks at him. And they're just like, all right, I guess he's coming with us.
and he's like, I don't really want to go. So it's interesting, because he's kind of he's a little bit, of a baby. He's used to really nice things and being clean and all this kind of stuff. And so he's kind of avoiding the whole thing. But what's interesting is throughout the movie, and this is kind of how groups of men work. You've worked with groups of men. I've worked with groups of men. You have to win their respect. And throughout this movie, at first, they do not respect him. He's a foreigner. He's smaller than they are. These guys are like huge, broad, Northmen. Northmen were known for being massive. They had massive horses. They make fun of his horse all the time, because he's riding an Arabian horse, and those horses were known for speed and
endurance.
Speed and endurance, and the Percherons, or I don't know, maybe Clydesdales. They were known for being bulky and being able to carry a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So they're always making fun of him. And to win, one of the first things he does to win their respect is there's a montage, and he learns their language. Now they've already established that he's kind of a smart guy. He's well educated. So it's not, and he's probably versed in several languages. So it's not too hard to believe that he would learn their language in a matter of months. I mean, it's shorthand for the movie. It implies that he learned it in a matter of months. It stretches credulity a little bit, but not enough to ruin the movie. This is why I thought this movie was a little clunky in the beginning, because it's just having a hard time finding its footing in the beginning. And it gets better at it as the movie progresses in the story. Once they get to Hrothgar's kingdom, it's established that something's off in this new village. Basically, they're riding in, they're looking around. They keep making comments about there's not any young men. All their warriors are dead. They don't have any defenses around the Great Hall, Hrothgar's Hall. So again, this is the story of Beowulf. Most people will recognize it because they've learned it in English. So, but it's told in a less fanciful, more realistic way. I believe Robert Zemeckis made a completely CGI'd version with Angelina Jolie about this same story. But it's all fantasy. It's all fantasy. It's all magic and power and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And do you have any thoughts before we maybe get into the spoilers of it?
It's kind of fun just seeing him just struggle with it all, right? He's just kind of struggling through. He's not a warrior. One of my favorite lines in this is, and scenes really, and I don't think this gets into any spoilers, so, but it's their first night in the hall, and they board it all up. The men are all laying around basically in a circle, and sleeping, and
they're pretending to sleep. Yeah.
Antonio Banderas wakes up. Ibid wakes up, and he looks around, and their eyes are all open. They're all looking around, but they're acting like they're snoring. So they're acting like they're asleep, looking around, waiting for these monsters to come in.
Yeah.
And
so Hrothgar, I guess we should say Hrothgar claims that there are monsters that keep coming to kill and carry away the dead.
A dragon.
The dragon. They've said a dragon. They've called it a worm, a light worm or something like that.
Fire worm. Yeah, something like that.
So there's a lot of superstition around it. And what's really great about this, and John McTiernan did a really good job in Predator. So in Predator, it has all these burly, awesome dudes that start showing fear. Because there's a entity out in the forest, out in the woods, whatever, that they don't understand. And it is interesting. It's an interesting concept to have for these warriors who've obviously had major tribulations in their lives. They're showing a little bit of fear. And the Vikings were what's interesting about the book is that the Vikings were considered to be a warrior. So if you died of old age, that was a undignified death. They believed that dying in battle, they were a lot like the Spartans. Dying in battle is the ultimate goal. And
Yeah.
so they were
The
always
ultimate
trying to
honor.
the ultimate honor. Yeah. And so what was interesting about one of the lines in, were you gonna say this line? So one of the lines,
Yeah, this line was basically the guy that's next to him
yeah,
is like, get ready.
get ready.
And we're all gonna, form a circle in the middle when they come.
But he's got
And he
a
says,
smile on his face. He's got a smile on his face. He's like
he's like,
giddy.
all
He's like
right, this is
happy.
gonna
He's
happen.
like, this is gonna happen. And
And
Antonio Banderas's character is like, why are you so happy? Why are you so, why are you happy about this? And he's like, well, fear profits no man.
oh, prophets. That's right. Before they went to sleep. He's fear prophetess no man. But he says, he's like, I'm not
the line is, fear profits man nothing. Fear
Yeah.
profits man nothing.
That was
which
good.
I thought was great.
But then,
really, yeah.
And he says, he's like, I'm no warrior. He gives him the sword, and he's like, I'm no warrior. And then the guy next to him, I forget his name. He was kind of a plucky, upbeat character throughout the film. But he says, very soon you will be. It's just like, you're in it, buddy. You are going to be, you got to be a warrior very
right
soon.
Now. Yeah.
When they come in, you're going to be a warrior. Just loved it.
Yeah. So these beings come in, they have a skirmish with them, and it basically, and
I thought that scene was done very well. Like,
it's shot in the dark. It's a lot of dark fighting and stuff like that.
But when they take the guy, there's one of the big guys, they take his head.
Yeah.
It, like, I was watching it and I was just like, that was really cool how they did that. I don't know what special effects they did or what.
It looks like mostly just practical effects, horror effects, essentially.
Yeah.
So I mean, this movie's probably not as good as Predator is, not as well done. Mainly because of the clunky beginning, I would have to say. But it still does a pretty good job of, the action is, you kind of know what's going on. You know that these invaders have come into the hall. They've grabbed and they're taking away the dead. And that's what freaks everybody out, is that they don't leave their dead. They take them with them. I guess we should get into spoilers, right?
Yeah, sure. If you haven't seen this film,
it's over
now,
20 years old.
I mean,
so
the hope is that, somebody will be going on Amazon trying to find something to watch, and they'll feel in the mood for a medieval show. They'll come to YouTube or wherever our podcast is at, Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and they'll listen to this and they'll be like, all right, cool, I'm gonna go watch that. So but yeah,
go check it out. It's a fun adventure movie. It probably brings nothing else other than just being a fun adventure movie. And kind of giving a sense of camaraderie between warriors. So that's probably the best way to put it. So we'll get into spoilers now. It turns out that this supernatural being that's coming to take away the dead, kill people and then take them away, turns out that they are kind of like before the like Stone Age cannibals, that maybe time had not, a progression of humans had not gotten to because of their isolation. And it seems like there's thousands of them. It's a good explanation for So even though the Norsemen were kind of considered, to be, savage, uneducated, they couldn't read, they didn't have they didn't have a written language. They what they still there was still something more savage than them, which would be cannibals, which would be people who eat other people, which is the reason that this was originally called the Eaters of the Dead, because the fear that the Norsemen were feeling was the fact that there were no dead bodies left behind. They carried off their dead so they could eat them, and that's pretty much what this evil entity is doing. And they do play it up as a kind of a supernatural, kind of borderlining supernatural evil, which I found very fascinating. So if you remember anything about your English class with Beowulf, Beowulf basically fights Grendel in the hall, cuts off his arm, and then tracks Grendel down in his lair, in his cave. And that's where he encounters Grendel's mother, and that's where the rest of the story kind of continues. They go, the warriors go into basically their den, their these cannibals.
Yeah, we'll just
area.
say it kind of builds up that they're beasts, right? But you find out fairly quickly, and Antonio Banderas's character has kind of he kills one and he looks at it and sees that it's a man.
Yeah.
And it kind of pisses him off. He's just like, it's just a man. It's just a man. And
why are we afraid of these? Yeah.
Yeah. And then it goes on to them. They get hit really hard. It
kills a bunch
of their people, a bunch of their men die. And then they kind of decide that they're going to go, well, one of the gals in the king's court takes them to a seer, a oracle, and she kind of tells them, hey, you gotta
go find them,
go kill the mother inside her underground. And Antonio Banderas kind of figures it out that they think they're bears. They wear bear skins, head dressing, bear skins. They think they're bears. Where would a bear hibernate? In a cave.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then
if
we got to kill the mother in the ground, then that's in the ground. Let's go find the cave where they're at. And so they go into this cave, this labyrinth of cave, which is kind of, it's like, how in the world would you find, the mother in this labyrinth of cave where there's warriors all laying around.
This is kind of where they reveal that they're cannibals, because they're walking around with torches, and then they go, look at your feet, and they look down, and there's just mountains and mountains of people skulls and people
bones
everywhere. So it reveals that this is a more evil presence than they could even imagine. So they get to the mother, and this is where, so in the original story that this is based on, the Grendel's mother is the character that Beowulf fights, and it's like this big battle. So the character that's supposed to be Beowulf is a very interesting actor. He's got an interesting face, and he doesn't have a lot of lines, but he has this connection with Antonio Banderas' character because he wants to learn how to write language. And so Antonio Banderas is kind of it's a moment between them to show that he's not a stupid Viking, that he's actually kind of smart. And so he kind of, and they play that up. And I think in the book, if I remember correctly, there was more of that between the two characters because he's always a Beowulf, or Bolvi is what they call him in this, was always kind of this character that was kind of imposing, a silent, imposing presence. But they have these moments together with him and Antonio Banderas' character, which is a great. It just kind of shows that he's not a fool, and that he's actually kind of smart. And they go in, and he fights the mother, the priest, or the head. What would they call it? The queen or whatever.
Yeah, something along those lines. Yeah.
And basically he has a fight with her, but she poisons him, and so he's weakened pretty heavily. And they narrowly escape the caves. But it seems that the Grendel, or they call him the Wendell, in this, it's all pronunciations that Michael Crichton
are a little bit different. Yeah.
Well, Michael Crichton gets into it in the book. He kind of explains why the pronunciations are different in his book. The book kind of reads like almost like a travel log of Antonio Banderas' character. He's just basically going, on this date we did this, and he keeps it interesting, but it's basically like him just it's almost like he's a scientist observing the Northmen, and it's an interesting way to, I guess, write a novel. And it is an interesting novel because they go into like the burial rituals of the Vikings. Michael Crichton was a huge, when he was writing his book, he was big into research, and so he did tons and tons of research. And so, like, the Vikings used to take a slave girl, and they would basically kill her to bury with a king.
She's going with him,
and she would volunteer. So it was an honor for her to do it. So, I mean, different times, right? I mean, if you're into anthropology, that is extremely interesting stuff. If you to see how ancient people lived, and to
how they were
different, and they were very, I mean, some of their stuff was archaic. Like, some of them, that was just like, why did they do this? And it was superstition. It was heavily driven by superstition.
It was super great. I loved that they had a little bit of Game of Thrones kind of court drama that was going on. The king's son. They come to help the king, and his son is just kind of a pompous dick. For
the best way to put it, for
whatever reason. I mean, that it's odd because I guess that was what there was a rumor, I guess, going around that Beowulf of Bolvine was trying to usurp the throne.
Yeah.
There. And so I guess his son would have a problem with that, right? Would have a problem with that. But what happens, it was an interesting kind of play where the fun character that always called Antonio Banderas little brother, let's go little brother, Hergar. So, and he goes ahead and picks one of the main warriors for the king's son, and picks on him until they challenge each other to a duel, which to me is like, I don't know, it seems so trivial at the time because it's like, hey guys, we might be facing annihilation by these, flesh eating cannibals that want to come kill us all.
Yeah.
But let's all stop for a minute in saving our butts by making a wall, a fence, and let's kill each other.
Well, and Antonio Banderas' character is kind of like, this is senseless. Why are we doing this? We have a bigger issue to deal with. And what's interesting is that the Beowulf character, who's always very quiet, very silent, doesn't say much, just gives orders. He agrees with Antonio Banderas' character. He says after the duel is over and the Hagar has won, Beowulf goes, we could have used his sword.
Yeah.
He's like, this was senseless. We could have used his sword. So he acknowledges that it was dumb, but
we
at
had
the
to
same
kill
time,
a high price. He called it. He's like, at a high price.
High price.
Now the high price was, and Antonio Banderas asks why, because it's an antics where, we're in spoilers. So, but it's an antics where he acts like he's going to lose this fight.
Hagar
and
does.
He's tired and he's just like, oh, God, I guess I'm losing. And then once the prince gives the order to have him killed, he's just like, all right,
he could have killed him.
He
could have killed
cuts
him.
his head off. Done. He kills him.
Hagar could have done it the whole time, but
he could have killed him the whole time.
Yeah, but the whole point of that scene is to show that you don't show the other side of your hand right away. That's like in warfare.
Hagar has a really, is it Hagar? Hagar.
What? What the fuck? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Right? I think. Anyway, he has a line after that, which says, which is really cool, where he says, now, if I'd killed him right away, he would have known what he sees. But since he thought he was going to win, now he has to question what he can't see.
Yeah.
And I mean, to that effect, and I was like, that's a good.
Well, that's
good line.
that's how the Wendell works, is that they are always challenging what they don't see.
Yeah.
So that they've used fear. So fear, like it's a fear-based tactic to try to get the opposite side to question what they know. It's basically it's kind of like mind warfare.
Yeah.
So, and it's an interesting way to show that that's what they needed to do with the enemy to win. So the fact that they go into the lair is something that the cannibals didn't expect. They caught them off guard. They didn't know that this was going to happen because nobody else had found their lair. It's an interesting tactic, and then it puts them on their heels. They're going like, whoa, wait. So what kind of enemy are we dealing with here now?
That might be a kind of a theme throughout of kind of stated when they right before the first fight scene, which was that fear profiteth man nothing.
Yeah.
And the fact that so much of this is built around fear, like create fear, and
fear-based
if
tactics,
you are afraid, then and then at the end being when Antonio Banderas prays right before their last battle, where basically everybody thinks they're all going to die.
Yeah.
He just asks God to allow him to live his last moments well.
Yeah.
Merciful Father, I have squandered my days with plans of many things. This was not among them. But at this moment, I beg only to live the next few minutes well. For all we ought to have thought, and have not thought. All we ought to have said, have not said. All we ought to have done, and have not done. I pray thee, God, for forgiveness.
And
which is a great thing, a great scene to have. You know, when the odds are stacked against you, you want your heroes to just go out there and go, I'm going to do the best that I can. And, you know, and that's what they all end up doing. Even Beowulf, who's weakened by the poison from the queen, he comes out and he's still going to fight too. And he's pale, and he's obviously, he's the best of the warriors, and he's the most weakened, and they all kind of look to him. And that's when they say the famous Viking prayer, which I think still gives me chills just thinking about the Viking prayer. I mean, it's one of the best written prayers. I don't know if that's a real prayer. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know if the writers just put it together on the spot.
Yeah, I couldn't quite find out if that was a real Norse prayer. I mean,
I think it was written for the movie. I'm pretty sure.
I'm sure it was kind of grabbing an essence in Norse mythology and Norse culture.
They
kind of needed to let's figure out what kind of grabs the essence of all this, and let's put this. But whether or not it actually was something that was said a lot, I'm not sure. But it made for a great film.
Yeah, it made for so it kind of puts, you know, in that it kind of, okay, so there's these moments in movies that we all love and like give us chills.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of them. There's the speech from Gladiator where he says, I'm going to have my vengeance in this life or the next.
Yeah.
That's one of them. There's the not
William
every
Wallace,
man, William Wallace is not every man really lives.
Freedom speech. Yeah.
There's so many of these like little nuggets of speeches that if you put behind really great music and some really great visuals, it sears into your brain as one of the highlights of cinema. It does that. It does that pretty brilliantly. I mean, it's a great scene in a kind of, I would say it's a major great scene in a somewhat lacking film, you know, because for me that moment makes up for all the little faux pas of the rest of the film.
The film, yeah,
because it's not. I wouldn't say it's a great film. I like the film a lot, but I wouldn't put it up there on like any. Probably wouldn't even make my top 10, but it's still a pretty great film. I mean, you know, and for that speech, for that prayer alone, it's worth it. Especially when they're saying it and they all join in on saying it while they see this horde of cannibals on horseback coming after them. So, you know, and it's them just defending this, you know, this land, you know, it's it's good. It's what makes us love cinema. So
Yeah.
yeah. Got anything to add, brother?
I had my qualms at the end because one of the things that Bullvine, or the Beowulf character,
Mhm.
he kind of, while he's dying from the poison, they're
Mhm.
like he's probably gonna die from this. He says, I will die a pauper because I have only these two hands. I will die a pauper. And then the king basically says, how about you die a king? I will
You
basically say,
you will be buried as a king.
you'll be buried as a king. And then he
This was
kind of
because the
mentions,
Vikings believed in an afterlife. It was very important that when they send their ship off and they burn the ship and they kill the slave and put the slave with her, with the female slave with him, and all that kind of stuff. It was really important for them to have their jewels and their wealth that they had accumulated with them over time to take with them to the afterlife, because they believed that that's what would happen. And it was this is how we know, because they would bury ships and they would be full of, well, like what would be considered wealth at the time. So
anyway, he says, I may be considered rich if someone were to draw my story, that others may know my story.
yeah, no,
And he
yeah,
kind of looks to Antonio Banderas's character,
who can write.
and who's a scholar who can write, and he says, yes, that might make you wealthy indeed. Right. So just kind of this
Writing down,
understanding, like,
yeah.
that, I'll tell your story.
Well,
Now,
the story,
I
the
did,
legend of Beowulf is one of the oldest stories on record,
right, exactly.
if not
So,
the oldest story on record.
but I didn't feel like that promise was kind of followed through at the end when
When he's writing,
Antonio Banderas' character is leaving, Ibid is leaving, and it shows him writing, but what he says when he's writing is like, this is my story. This is my story of like going and seeing the Norsemen and
yeah,
trying to be true to God. Like,
it's
it
a
was
clunky, it's a clunky
it was kind
ending.
of a clunky. I was just like, wait a minute. Like, you were supposed to be writing Beowulf, like Bullvine's story.
Yeah,
It's not really your story. So I had my qualms with like that ending. I was just like,
it
oh,
would.
okay. I
So
mean,
what would be really interesting is if somebody had the time, because I think that you could, if you had the time and you had extra footage, you could re-edit this movie to be a far superior film.
yeah,
But
kind of
I
like
think,
Kingdom of Heaven.
well, yeah, yeah,
There might be a director's cut out there someplace,
no, not for
but
this one. I don't
there's not.
think, because it was such a box. So let's talk a
Yeah.
little bit of it was a box office bomb. It had legs on DVD when it came out. So
Mm.
this often happened in the 90s, or the early 2000s, you'd have this bomb of a movie that would actually have a pretty good sales on DVD.
It would,
And it would,
the cult fought. There would be
yeah,
like a
they would
little
have
bit of a cult following
following. Yeah.
that would kind of happen.
And
Yeah.
and this is a fairly popular film among a lot of dudes that I know. They all say, "Oh, that's a great movie. I like that movie," and stuff like that. So it has had legs, I would say, but it was, at the time, it was a box office bomb. John McTiernan ended up having something. Ended up going to jail, I think, for tax evasion of some kind. He it he's had a long and a crazy career. He only made 3 movies after this movie, and then he pretty much it doesn't have a career anymore.
Yeah.
Which is sad because he had a great run. Like Die Hard is considered the best Christmas movie of all time. Predator, the first Predator hasn't really been matched since it came out with there's been so many Predator movies that you can't keep count anymore.
Mhm.
But I mean the whole point is that he was a really good action director, and you know, one could argue that this movie kind of ruined his career because it went way over budget. They didn't have enough money after they made the movie to market the movie. And so it kind of had a huge flop. And you can kind of tell because the beginning is clunky and the end is clunky. So you can kind of tell that there was something was happening behind the scenes that made this movie a far inferior film than it could have been. And it would be interesting to know if somebody had the ambition to try to find footage or even rearrange footage with like a new voiceover. You could probably do a way better job, you know.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
unfortunately, because if you had like taken this motif of the hero, you know, we have heroes or whatever motif from the beginning to the end, he could say the age of heroes, and he could talk about being heroic and fighting for something better than your own selfish gains, you know, all that kind of stuff. That would be,
or kind of that fear,
or facing your
facing fear.
Yeah.
It's the crippling fear can be crippling. But if you face it, you can become better.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Maybe. I mean,
But
it's still a good movie. It just, it could have had, you know, you could have, with a little tweaking, I think it could have been a better movie.
I still, it kind of baffles me that some of these 90s, you know, some of these 90s films and, you know, early 2000 films are just so good. Like, I don't know, what a great era
for
some
movies.
Great films.
Yeah. 99, there's a whole book, forget the name of the book, but there's a whole book about the movies that came out in 99, because 99 was a big year for movies. A lot of classics came out of 1999. So anyway, I think we can wrap it up. Audience, check us out on social media, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Just look for the Sword in the Skull. If you are just listening to this, please go to YouTube and give us a like, share, and subscribe. There are our bags. Thanks for that, brother. In the meantime, keep reading, keep listening, keep watching, learn more. We'll see ya.
See ya.
Lo, there do I see my father. Lo, there do I see my mother and my sisters and my brothers. Lo, there do I see the line of my people. Back to the beginning.
Lo, they do call to me.
They bid me take my place among them.
In the halls of Valhalla,
Where the brave
they live
forever.